My preparation for YCS Dallas can pretty much be summarized in the fact that I literally haven't taken the tags off of my suitcase yet. Today, I thought I would do sort of a discussion video, not so much on the version. So I record either like on my laptop or in person, and I wanted to do this one in person because I wanted to talk about a bunch of different cards and also have the physical deck here by me. But at YCS Dallas, I'm not really going to do well. I know that I'm not going to play Spirals. However, I think I can make myself do the least terrible by taking the same approach that many of the Burning Abyss players at the 2015 WCQ took strategy-wise. So at that WCQ, Necroz was clearly like one of the best decks, if not the best deck, although Burning Abyss obviously ended up taking first and second. The reason being is that they had a lot of really good hard counters to Necroz that they could main deck, such as Mistake, and also they could deplete their hand to play around Necroz or Trishula. So frogs are good for a lot of reasons. The main one being that they have a lot of momentum, and once you get to your first Totally Awesome, they're pretty much going to outvalue all of their opponent's plays. I can say at the last regional that I played at, every single time I opened Totally Awesome, I won. Toad is just way too good. One Totally Awesome gets you obviously to your dupe frog, but then also if it survives, you can get to a swap frog on your next turn. Instead of you have swap and dupe, swap can put a rodent toad in your graveyard, and then you have multiple exceed summons basically for free. And then also, even if they kill the toad, you get a card back, and then if you resolve the toad, a lot of times your opponent has to waste 2 cards to get rid of toad, and you steal the first one, so that's really good, and then you get a water back. It's just really hard to come back from, even if your opponent is playing like one of the best decks. So my goal is to win some die rolls and summon toad, basically, and I don't think that's even that bad. A lot of times you don't even have to summon Toad the first turn to win. You just have to get to it on the second turn, and you can use your trap cards to get there. Spirals and Magicians are obviously going to be the best decks for this event, and I realize that, and I realize that they're going to be more consistent than my deck, and that when I go second, it might be kind of tough, but when I go first, my plan is going to be to floodgate them, and some people might not like that, but I think that it's actually pretty viable. So the 2 floodgates that I'm going to focus on at this event are going to be Anti-Spell Fragrance and Mistake. Both these cards are very good against Pendulums and Spirals and True Draco variants for that matter. And by playing a full 3 copies of these cards, when you go first, you have such a high chance of opening one of them that you can usually just auto-win as long as your opponent can't out these cards. And the big difference between... Here, I can zoom in. The big difference between frogs playing these cards and Burning Abyss playing these cards is that I actually have a card to protect them. So anytime that you can summon Toad next to one of these cards, you almost instantaneously win the game. And that's really what I'm looking to do. I'm not looking so much to outvalue my opponent just in general without summoning a Toad or without having a Floodgate, but I know that in combination, the Toad and the Floodgate, you can almost win every single matchup against Spirals or Magicians. Obviously, that's only looking at it in a vacuum because you have to open these cards and also you have to go first, but I think that's at least semi-viable, and in testing so far, it's been looking pretty good. But these cards are really good. So Mistake stops all the Spiral searching. It's sort of like just a better Ash Blossom or Droll Knockbird when you go first. Anti-Spell Fragrance slows them down but doesn't deplete them entirely, or doesn't restrict them from their hand entirely, because they can still do stuff. So I mean, they can still like make some plays if they open like Quick Fix, but they can't make as many plays. They can't get to Spiral Resort, which is really important. They can't use the Equip spell. They can't use the Premature Burial. They can't use any of those cards. And also, we're just going to assume that anytime that we open these cards, not only can we have Totally Awesome, we can have like Solemn Strike. We can have, I mean, pretty much any slew of things to stop their effects. Magic Deflector, I'm kind of going back and forth on, but it seems kind of good. But this is sort of my plan A, if you will. And then the plan B, if we go second, we want to have ways to tackle our opponent in 2 different ways. The first way is going to be with hand traps. Now, when you go second and open hand traps, and I'm almost certainly going to be playing Droll and Lockbird, as well as possibly DD Crow and Ghost Ogre. But at the very least, I know I'm going to be playing these cards. And when you go second and open these cards, it lets your opponent not just totally win the game, because they'll be forced to stop. Now, I do have to say that these cards are significantly worse against Pendulum Magicians compared to Spirals. These cards are very good against Spirals, but they're not so good against Pendulum Magicians. But I think that the Spiral hype is definitely going to be having a lot of people playing that deck, so I think that it's worth playing these cards. I think the big one here is that Maxi is, while it's not terrible against Pendulum Magicians, it's not the best card. Against Spirals, though, it basically forced them to stop their turn, which is really what we're trying to do. So that's sort of the plan A, or the, sorry, if the plan A is these cards, this would be the plan B. Plan C is if we don't open a hand trap, or if the hand trap isn't enough to stop their turn. And this is sort of the part I'm having the hardest problems with, or the most problems with, is what happens if our opponent establishes a board and we're going second. That's obviously when Paleozoics are the weakest. So we have a couple different options here. Let me grab these. So the ones that are kind of available, obviously Paleozoic Dinomischus is pretty good at taking apart established boards. Maybe not the most impactful card because it does take a card out of your hand, but in most cases a Karma Cut's going to be pretty good. Also, Solemn Strike in that same regard is going to be, both these are pretty much good going first or second. I also have been considering Gamma Seal. This card was pretty lackluster for me at the regional. But I'm not even sure if this card is that good right now, because if Spiral Sleeper's effect activated when it was removed from the field instead of being destroyed, then this card would be really good, because then if you Gamma Sealed the Sleeper, they would just lose their entire board. But as it stands, if you Gamma Seal the Sleeper, while it does mess them up a lot, it doesn't actually deal with their entire board. It just deals with the Sleeper and the last resort, which is, I mean, that's pretty good. It's just not, like, great. But I was also thinking of maybe even Raw Sphere Mode, kind of like an interesting option there. We don't always need a normal summon, and a lot of times taking out 3 monsters is actually like really good. Another avenue I've been looking, though, is the Mere Force cards. Right now I have Quaking and Drowning. I think Stormy Mere Force could be viable as well. Stormy Mere Force is really, really bad against Pendulums. Well, maybe not like the worst card ever, but pretty much infinitely worse than these cards. Whereas Quaking Mere Force is pretty bad against Spirals. It does out the Sleeper, but it doesn't work on any of the Link monsters they summon. So I think that Drowning Mere Force might actually be the best option. The problem with Drowning Mere Force is that if it doesn't protect, you're totally awesome if you do summon it. This card only works when you don't have any monsters, which is kind of awkward. Blazing Mere Force, I think, is out of the question because it like destroys them, and that's not very good. Especially because all the Spirals, when they're equipped with Last Resort, sort of get around that destruction effect. But I think the Mere Forces are actually pretty good. I know these cards, I mean, ironically, over the course of time, Mere Forces were seen as being only good when you went first, but I think nowadays they're actually pretty good going second. Another card I considered was Needle Sealing or Torrential Tribute, but I think that those have the same problem that Blazing Mere Force has, or regular Mere Force for that matter. But these are sort of my plan C. When I'm going second, I don't draw a hand trap, and my opponent manages to make a big board. These are sort of my options. And in some regards, sort of ones that go with plan A and plan C would be, I am still playing Surface and Soul Charge at this moment. So when you go first and you open these cards, it can almost always get you to totally awesome. If you go second and open these cards, you can, when your opponent like kills your Swap Frog, you can then just bring it back and make Toad that way. So these cards are sort of, I think they're would be considered like extenders for helping. They're sort of like Shuffle Reborn in some regards, but I think those are pretty good. The last thing I wanted to talk about is that what cards did I have to cut to get to this point where I can. I mean, at this point, we've added a whole bunch of cards. We've added Mistake. We've added a lot more hand traps because I'm going to be playing Droll and Lockbird in addition to what I was already playing. The Mere Forces obviously take up space, stuff like that. What have we cut? I think the biggest thing that's not in this deck anymore is Paleozoic Marilla. Now, hear me out. I actually got this idea from someone else. I think it was a Spanish regional or some regional that a guy got first at, or at least top 8 at. He did well at, and he wasn't playing Paleozoic Marilla or the one that is basically Cypher Lord Omega. He was just playing Dynamiscus, the Book of Moon guy, and the Spell and Trap card guy. So he was just playing those two, and then the Dynamiscus. So just 9 Paleozoics. And the reason being is that Paleozoic Marilla is probably like the worst card in the entire deck. It's the only card that doesn't actually do anything, especially when you go first. This card basically just sets you up for 2 Paleozoics in the graveyard. You use the first copy to send the second copy, but that doesn't actually accomplish anything. It doesn't disrupt your opponent's plays. It's not even that good when you go first. It's not really that good when you go second. It's only good in very specific hands when your hand's already good. And he cut this card, and I'm presuming he cut it just because it doesn't do anything. And when you cut this card, what I'm trying to do at least is play 40 cards that actually do something. And I don't mean to dog on this card too much because it's not utterly trash, and in some cases it is good having 2 Paleozoics in the graveyard, because that means if you open this card and any 2 trap cards, you can then get a Toad or an Opabania, which is pretty good. But overall, I want cards that do things when I draw them, and obviously Rodent Totem is probably the next worst one because it doesn't actually do anything by itself, but I mean, you're already only playing 2 copies of that card, and you can't really not play that card. But I think Paleozoic Marilla in general is a pretty good cut. A lot of the times in this deck, you're just opening like Dupe Frog set 4 with like 1 Paleozoic, and that's enough to get to a Toad, and that's usually all you need. I mean, you don't need to be greedy and go for Mistar Boy and 3 Toads or whatever. Usually, if you can just get to that first Toad, it's enough to win the game. But anyway, I probably rambled on enough. I didn't want to just show off the entire deck because I am still changing things, but those are some of my thought processes going into this YCS Dallas. Although, honestly, I'm going more just to hang out with people, because I will be there Thursday through Mondays and only at the tournament Saturday and Sunday. So that leaves Thursday, Friday, and Monday to just hanging out with John and Simo. But if you do see me there, feel free to say hi. And yeah, I think it'll be fun. I'll be sure to have a post-event deck profile as well. But I just kind of want to talk about where my head was at in this current moment. But I will see you guys later. Bye.